Welcome back to the Spectre Creative Channel. I'm your host, Scott Toy Guru Nightlick, and yep, that's me smiling there with a whole bunch of Masters of the Universe toys in my hands. Why is this? Well, I was the brand manager for this line at Mattel for about 10 years, the big length of it, and I got some really amazing experiences. And a lot of that is because I was a fan. I am a fan. I grew up with He-Man. That's me there in the middle between Sean and Justin, two of my best friends from Cheshire, Connecticut. And getting to grow up with the brand and then become the brand manager was absolutely a dream come true. And while this channel has focused a lot on individual figures and talking about the logistics of making the toys, one of the questions that comes up a lot is, well, I don't know much about Masters of the Universe. What's the difference between the lines? In fact, I recently got asked this in the comment section by DLPI, asking for a breakdown of the different Motu lines. So, seems like a great idea. So let's do an abbreviated, short version of the history of Masters of the Universe. I'm sure I will leave stuff out, and I will probably get a fact or two wrong, and you can let me know in the comments. But let's dive right in. So what is Masters of the Universe? Well, it is a property that was created by Mattel in 1982. Well, the work was done in 1980 and 81, centering around He-Man, that's the big guy with the sword there, Battle Cat, that's the green tiger, Teela under him, and Man-at-Arms at the bottom right, as well as some other heroic characters against the evil forces of Skeletor. That's the guy with the blue skin and the skull face. Above him you see Trapjaw, and to the right of him Beastman, and then Evil Lyn, Triclops, Merman squatting below there, and Whiplash off to the right with his spiked tail. And these two factions would fight on the planet Eternia, which is a mythical, magical planet that has both barbarians and technology mixed in one, especially because it was influenced by Jack Kirby comics. So let's go back to the 80s and do a brief history of the creation of this brand and the different iterations in toys and media. So it all starts, like every story, with Star Wars. Mattel had said no thank you when they heard about Star Wars and it was pitched, and, well, when Star Wars went on to become the best thing since sliced bread, Mattel was left realizing, oh, or doh, maybe we should have taken that line. So they needed a competitive line in the boys' action aisle to compete with Star Wars. So they gathered some of their smartest brain trusts at the Hacienda Hotel in El Segundo, California, which ironically is across the street from Mattel now. And the winner of this sort of brainstorm was Roger Sweet, who had proposed the He-Man Trio, which was meant to sort of be a male Barbie that could be anything, military, barbarian, space. Well, the barbarian theme won out, and the next Mattel employee that came along was Mark Taylor, who fleshed out the characters and turned them into a barbarian world that also had technology and laser guns. He created looks for the characters based on Roger Sweet's original Trio and fleshed them out with designs that were inspired by previous Mattel toy lines such as Big Jim from the 1970s. A lot of times when product lines are designed by the same team, some of the same visuals tend to bleed over, and I saw this a lot during my time at Mattel. It's no surprise it happened in the 80s too. And then a MacGuffin was needed for the line, which was going to be Castle Grayskull, which would be the mysterious fortress of power for He-Man and his foes. The story was originally just going to be told in toy form, but when Toys R Us executives asked for a little more, Mattel quickly said, well, we're going to include mini-comics that will tell the story. So mini-comics were quickly commissioned that would enhance the story and act as a cross-sell for the line, showing off other characters, other vehicles, and of course that essential playset, Castle Grayskull, that was needed in order to tell out the stories. And the gentleman who told out these stories is notorious dinosaur head holder Don Glut, also known as the author of the Empire Strikes Back novelization. So Don created the original storyline to go with the original 1982 lineup. 4 heroic warriors, He-Man, Man-at-Arms, Teela, and Stratos, against 4 evil warriors, Skeletor, Beastman, Merman, and Zodak. So, with an equal side on both teams so that it could be evenly matched, shall we say, the line was ready to ship out to stores. Now, it should be noted that there were also one beast that was Battle Cat. You see Teela riding on Battle Cat there, the green tiger, as well as two vehicles, the Wind Raider, a flying vehicle, and the Battle Ram, a tank-like vehicle, both inspired by Jack Kirby's Fourth World, which was a toy line that the Mattel designers had worked on previously to He-Man, and again, you can see the design influences bleeding over into Masters of the Universe. Teela, the only female in the line, was originally two characters and originally two figures. Without her snake armor, she was going to be Teela, the warrior, and then with the included snake armor, she was the goddess, who later became renamed the sorceress. When these two characters were combined into one figure, instead of releasing two separate figures, just with a mask that could be removed, they needed an eighth figure. So Zodak here became the last-minute addition to ensure they had 4 evil warriors and 4 heroic warriors, so again, everything could be even Stevens, and that's why Zodak is also sometimes known as a neutral character. Alright, so it's ready to package the figures off in their bright brick asteroid explosion with that little dimple in the center created by Bill O'Keefe to keep the figure pinned against the back card without shuffling around. And the back showed the infamous 8-back, which was illustration cross-cell art that showed these original 8 figures. And a great way to learn about the line. So the mini-comics that Don Gluck created, the original story that he did as a work-for-hire, showed He-Man as a jungle barbarian leaving his tribe, meeting up with the goddess, hence Teela in the snake armor, though this time now with green skin. He's armored up and ready to find the legendary swords of power, because whoever finds both sides of the sword, you see there's 2 halves there combining, well, if you can combine both He-Man's sword and the other half came with Skeletor, and the 2 swords clipped together with a little male-female connector, and in the storyline, the idea was when the swords combined, they became the key to opening up Castle Grayskull's jaw bridge. Get it? Jaw bridge, like drawbridge, but it's a jaw. I know, toys are punny. DC Comics was then quickly brought in to expand the storyline once sales took off, because they realized, they being Mattel, that the 4 mini-comics weren't enough. And DC Comics greatly expanded how the story worked by creating more characters, an actual environment for Eternia, and most importantly, Prince Adam, who was the Clark Kent to Superman. He was the alternate identity of He-Man. He didn't get his powers by using the sword, but rather by running into a cave and coming out again as He-Man, kind of like Superman has the phone booth. The line continued to grow each year, adding more and more characters and more vehicles, and eventually more and more playsets, because it really caught on with kids. They found these figures to be the perfect avatars for their imagination. Characters like the heroic Ram Man and the evil Trapjaw turned out to be some of the most popular figures of the line, even though they came out in year 2. And again, you can continue to see the influence from the 1970s Big Jim line bleeding over into the design of many Masters of the Universe characters. This was also the time when other companies started putting out toys that could look like they could be part of Masters, because the toy line was on fire and was burning up at retail, and everyone wanted a piece of the pie. So that brings us to 1983. A great year to be alive and a great year to be a He-Man fan, because that was the year Filmation, the cartoon studio that Lou Scheimer ran, decided to partner with Mattel and launch the animated series He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Not to be confused with the toy name, just Masters of the Universe. So the lead character's name was put above the title. And this is where we got our culturally significant moment of He-Man raising his sword above his head and saying, "By the power of Grayskull, I have the power," and transforming from Prince Adam into He-Man in a spectacular way. And to say Masters of the Universe was taking over the universe is an understatement. In 1983-84, He-Man was the best-selling toy line in the country. Everything from playing cards to balloons. If you didn't have Masters of the Universe toys, you were not a cool kid. And this was the line to have. It was selling better than Barbie and Hot Wheels. And that meant it was time to continue to grow it. Skeletor now had his own home base in Snake Mountain, and seeing that so many females, girls, were buying into the brand, She-Ra was added in 1984, the long-lost sister of He-Man. She was originally created by the Boys Group to be an action figure line that would appeal more towards girls since demographics showed so many girls were buying He-Man toys, or Masters of the Universe toys, I should say. But the girls group, seeing what the boys group was doing, quickly absconded with her and turned her a bit more into a doll, using soft goods outfits and real hair, or rather, doll hair for hair play. She-Ra also got her own animated series, which was in continuity with He-Man, though she took place on a different planet where He-Man would visit, planet Etheria. So the popularity of Motu continued to then decline a little bit, especially for many factors. One was the introduction of a lot more, shall we say, D-list characters that weren't as well known or as prominent in the animation. And then, of course, there was competition, especially in terms of things like Transformers. And as a last hurrah, the Masters of the Universe live-action movie was released in 1987, and despite studio and Mattel infighting and some odd choices, the movie didn't do too well. It has a cult following, but it wasn't exactly the box office sensation that was going to save the brand. One final hurrah was thrown out in 1990. He-Man was recast from a barbarian warrior on the planet Eternia to more of a space warrior who would go around in a spaceship Eternia, the planet now named after, or spaceship named after the planet. And most of He-Man's supporting cast was eliminated, and he was given a new group of heroic warriors which would help him now defeat Skeletor, who had also gone into outer space. He was given a new look and a new shrunk-down toy that was now much smaller and less buff than the original, and didn't really feel the way the original toys were made of muscle. Though the toy line had some really cool accessories, playsets, vehicles, and figures, including an all-new look for Skeletor, now in his outer space outfit, the toy line bombed. In fact, the only thing that sold was the Power Sword. It was Mattel's one of their top 5 items of the entire year, was He-Man's Power Sword roleplay toy for the New Adventures of He-Man line. So, well, you can't sell a toy line on roleplay alone, and we now kind of entered the dark times of Motu, when it was really the fans that kept the brand alive on things like message lists and websites like He-Man.org, where fans continued to talk about the brand and in a pre-VHS or release talked about episodes. Mattel, for the 20th anniversary, launched a commemorative line only at Toys R Us that were recreations of the original figures, although these were kind of copies of copies. This led directly into a major relaunch of the brand in 2001 from Mike Young Productions, who teamed up with Mattel to create an all-new animated series that was designed to be an update of the Filmation. The look of the characters, both in terms of animation and toy, was essentially an update of the vintage line of how they were in the 80s, just now with more articulation and more modern sculpting, more details, bigger action features, that kind of thing. But you could still tell who each character was. Though they now came with, more weapons and had more kind of a anime early 2000s look to them, sculpted by the amazing Four Horsemen sculpting group out of New Jersey, who brought new life and hopefully would introduce Masters of the Universe to a new generation of kids with these updated figures. The characters were very recognizable for who they were, and they were released in red packaging that was reminiscent of the vintage packaging. When the line wasn't taking off, it was quickly renamed Masters of the Universe versus the Snake Men, and even some collector-only figures were released at conventions, since the only ones really into it were the adult collectors. Kids just didn't seem to like it. So the line sort of wrapped up prematurely, and the next time Motu would come out would be online only with the Masters of the Universe Classic series. This was the first figure in the line, King Grayskull, He-Man's ancestor, and then followed up quickly by He-Man, as well as a new figure every single month in what was essentially a Figure of the Month club. The reason it was able to survive was it was only available online. It bypassed retail entirely, so it didn't have to depend on retail interest or even kid interest. It was aimed completely at the adult collector, and this was the first time a Masters of the Universe line was done this way. Again, the characters were very recognizable with all of the right color elements, armor elements, etc., so you knew who you were getting, but now you were getting a figure that was more articulated, more detailed, and more in line with other figure lines adult collectors were buying. There were even great nods to the original line, such as Merman finally coming with a head that matched his artwork from the vintage line. While it originally was going to be 6 figures sold in 2-packs, the line took off very quickly, and after several sellouts, the figures were now coming out monthly and kept growing with convention figures, more characters added, additional subscription service so you could now be guaranteed your figure, as well as characters from the She-Ra Princess of Power line and new adventures. So now every character in all of Motu is offered for the first time in one toy line, all in the same scale. So the entire world of He-Man, including Castle Grayskull, was now in scale to each other. No longer were you going to have separate toy lines where a character was only in one line. After Mattel kind of was done focusing on the line, it was passed off to Super 7 that continued the line for a few years, coming out with waves of 4, which required a pre-order, much like the Matty subscription, culminating in their release of the second playset in the line, Snake Mountain. Castle Grayskull had been released by Mattel in 2012, and Snake Mountain would finish the line as the last item ever released under the Classics banner. The last figure, however, would be a Horde Zombie He-Man from the original vintage Slime Pit mini-comic, and this would actually be released by Mattel, who took the license back from Super 7. Because what's happening now is Mattel is now refocusing on the brand really more than ever. There's a new line at retail right now, and it's spring 2021 when I'm recording this, called Motu Origins, which recreates the vintage line but with more articulation in a way to bridge the gap between the adult collector and ideally the adult collector's own children. There's also more Motu form factors and toys at retail than there's ever been, including card games, Mega Blocks, which are like Lego, as well as Fisher-Price, Little People, and Imaginext. And there's 2 new shows in the works from Netflix, one aimed at kids, one aimed at adult collectors, and they're both going to have their own toy line in the fall of 2021. So this all begs the question, what's going on with He-Man in the future? Well, it's a little complicated. Mattel has toy rights at the moment, and that's why you see so many different form factors. Sony Pictures has rights to the live-action movie, which has been in development for almost 15 years. They keep promising it every couple years, and then it fades off again. So while Sony has live-action rights, Universal, through a whole series of events, and you can see the video here for more detail, owns the property, and all rights will revert to it in 2023. So, will He-Man be bigger than ever once the rights are with one company and not spread out among many? While originally created by Mattel, it is now a Universal property with Mattel having the toy rights, and we'll all wait to see if He-Man can once again be bigger than ever. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And if I left anything out, which I'm sure I did, Hero, Powers of Grayskull, just let me know, and I can always do a follow-up. Thanks for watching.